Welcome to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast. I am your host, Ian Bowen, and I am very excited to talk to our guest today, Dan Stowell. Welcome to the show. Thank you for making some time, because I know you're a very busy guy. We were kind of talking before we started the convo that you've got a game this afternoon, coaching some fifth grade girls in AAU. So good luck to you there. Do you guys have a team name, by the way?
We're Hype Athletics.
Hype Athletics.
Travel team. So we're just repping the organization.
That's awesome. Keeping it hype.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let me keep to the format here. Let me get into Dan's intro and his bio, because we got to get into his story, because it is an amazing one. And Dan is no stranger to adversity. From growing up with an alcoholic father to being diagnosed with Crohn's disease and having surgeries to remove his entire colon, to graduating as a Michigan State University Spartan during the disruption of COVID-19. Rep, Sparty. We see you.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
He leads by example and with empathy, drawing from his experience with Crohn's disease to showcase the resilient human spirit and inner fire he believes that we all have. Dan provides expert insights into stress management techniques, health optimization strategies, and peak performance. Whether you're an athlete, highly career-driven, or a wellness warrior, Dan has the tools to optimize your mental and physical performance to perform at your highest level. Now, his mission with his company, Nova Fusion, and podcast EMG Transformations is to be an icon of inspiration and beacon of hope for those battling adversity, showing that you can overcome your battles and still thrive, just like he's been able to do. And man, with that, Dan, let's jump into this crazy story called your life up to this point. And let's go back to the beginning, if you don't mind. If we can kind of start and kind of paint the picture for our listeners and viewers of where this journey began in your experience as a child.
Yeah. So I am from Livonia, Michigan, about 20 minutes away from downtown Detroit. And I grew up as an only child with an alcoholic father. And that presented its struggles early on. It's really been like that for as long as I can remember. And it seemed to just get worse and worse over the years. So through about 4th through 10th grade, that's when things really got bad with my father. And he got a couple DUIs. He went to jail for the summer. I'm really young at the time, probably around 10, and visiting him, taking time out of my summer and doing things like that, and not having that normal experience, and, being with my friends. I got to go see my dad at jail. So that was always different and weird. Like, you see it on the movies and you don't really expect that to happen like to you.
Right.
So that was one thing there. And, he was in rehab houses, rehab itself. So he was bouncing around. We were bouncing around at times. When he was home, it just wasn't safe, particular times. And my mom and I had to go leave and live with other family members for different periods of time. So it was a lot of just constant uncertainty, chronic stress, something that I'm learning about now, and how that can build up and create other problems in your life down the road. But, not looking at the negative, I always try to look at the positive. And looking back now, I view all of those tough times with my father as preparation for the next step or the next adversity that was to come in my life, because we'll get into it, but there were times when I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and going through this journey with it, I came a few times where I didn't think I was going to get through. And if it wasn't for those early experiences going through the adversity with my father, that really gave me the mental toughness, the resilience, the adaptability. I grew up at a young age, and all of that was really helpful for me, as I'm navigating my illness, and as I still am, because there's certain things and certain complications that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. So, getting that experience early on definitely helps me in the long run.
Right. So as a child, you were an only child. You didn't have any siblings to kind of share this burden of your father being an alcoholic and having to basically move around with your mom so you would stay out of his way, essentially.
Yeah.
How old were you at that point?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this was like fourth through 10th grade. So, fourth grade,
Okay.
I mean, we had a couple incidents when I was like 7, 8 years old, and then a couple more bad ones when I was like 12 to 13 range. Um, and yeah, it's just those were the times where it just wasn't safe to be in the house. My mom was always working very late, and she's trying to like hold the family together, working 2 jobs, sometimes even 3 at the time, while my dad's getting laid off and just at home doing nothing. I would get home from school, he wouldn't even pick me up. I would have to walk a mile, and I wouldn't know what I'm coming home to, and that always, I didn't do well in school because I was always focusing on what am I coming home to, or I just had these other
Sure.
distractions. Even when I was home, like I couldn't really focus and do my homework. So, um, yeah, it would have been nice to have, some siblings in that scenario where you can like
Yeah.
manage and cope to get through that together. But yeah, it was a tough experience. But again, those tough times are what make us into who we are.
That they do, for sure. So you're young, you're 10 years old ish, and the place that's supposed to be safety and the place that's supposed to be secure for you is the exact opposite. So in the beginning of your life, you're already up really fighting adversity and you're making your way through it. And then the universe decides to throw you a curveball.
Another one. Yeah.
Another one. Yeah, right. Another one.
Yeah. So, my dad actually, he started doing better in that junior year in 11th grade. But the summer going into my senior year of high school, I became diagnosed with, at the time, it was ulcerative colitis, but it evolved into Crohn's disease. And that's the more common term that people know today. So, 2 different diseases, though. But yeah, I had my first bout of that actually in Easter. So I ended up, my dad and my grandma both had their appendix removed, and I was just having this out of nowhere crazy intense pain in my lower right abdomen, and went to the ER. We didn't know what was going on, and I was there overnight, and they ended up just saying that I was constipated. And so um just didn't really think anything of it again. I was like, oh, kind of embarrassed. Like, oh, I just went to the hospital and was all dramatic just for that. Um, and so I feel like because of that, I probably put off any other symptoms or things that may have happened during that time that I just don't realize it looking back now. But I was on a camping trip in about August timeframe in 2015, and I was with my girlfriend at the time. We're on a camping trip, just alone, me and her, having a good time. We're actually in the beach, and we're playing in the water, having fun. Out of nowhere, I get this crazy urge to go to the bathroom, and I have to high knee it, run it out of the water. And like, I'm almost like going on myself. Like, it's this crazy thing. And never had that happen before. And it just continued throughout that trip. So I'm like, oh, was there something in the water? Did I eat something? Like, what's
Right.
going on here? Continues on for a couple months. And that's when I see a GI doctor. And, over some tests, they ended up having to do a colonoscopy. It's the only way to diagnose by seeing the ulcers internally.
Hmm.
Um, that's when I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and didn't know what that was at the time. Didn't really know anybody with it. And it was I'm just looking for answers. Like I don't have the answers. I know nothing about it. So doing what they say, taking the prescriptions, trying to, just get myself better, but nothing was working. And did some oral steroids, did some IV infusions, kept on getting worse. And so they said I had to get surgery to remove my entire colon. And
Poof.
big, big life change right there.
And so you're 17, 18, you said this is the summer before your senior year,
Yeah, I just turned 17.
and they hit you with, we're going to have to remove your colon. Like, what's going through your mind at that point?
I didn't take it serious. I'm very stubborn. I'll tell you that. And, I was like looking for a way to heal myself at that time. And knowing what I know now, like that's the question I get all the time is like, do you think you would be able to and avoid the surgery? Because it was progressing so bad, I'm not sure. But during that time, I'm just trying to get answers and do what I can. And nothing that the doctors were saying was helping. And so it got really hard. It was really burdening for me at that time. And yeah, like I was in denial that whole time. So when I did go see a surgeon for the first time, it was a pediatric surgeon because I was 17 at the time. And they presented this 3-part surgery that was over like 9-month span. And it just sounded really horrible. And I stopped listening after the first 5 minutes because I'm my own advocate and I'm not going to let that happen. And so I was like, okay, well, let's get a second opinion at least. And during that second opinion, it was a 2-part surgery, much better. And it was a very serious conversation. But in the middle of that conversation, I just completely broke down into tears, full body sweats and everything, because I realized that, I can't just heal myself. This is something that it happened, it's continuing to happen, and your entire life is going to change in a few months. And that realization broke me at the time. And
Yeah.
I didn't really have answers, and I just was like, okay, now I gotta start processing it.
Who is helping you process this? I mean, you're 17 years old, and do you have a better relationship with your father right now? Is he even in your life at this point? Are you doing this kind of alone on your own?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was actually getting worse during that period. He started doing prescription drugs, a little street drugs, and to the point where I had to get out of the house at that point and go live with my mom. It was nice to have the extra freedom temporarily because my mom's very strict, but in a good way. And she's just looking to do the best and protect me. But it just wasn't safe anymore. So at that time, it really was just me getting through it. I had 2 basketball friends that really stuck with me during that time and was always reaching out, checking in on me. During that time, though, like I wanted to self-isolate because I didn't know what was happening. I was trying to shut the world out, just in a lot of pain. I don't even want to like have engagements and talk to people. I'm just like not in the mood. But I can say that my mom, grandpa, those 2 friends, and my girlfriend at the time, those 5 people were the biggest support system at the time.
Yeah, man, I can't imagine it. 'Cause my son is 17 right now, and I can't imagine him trying to navigate all the things that you were experiencing pretty much on his own. That's incredible. You said earlier that you had to grow up fast, and man, you're not kidding. That's some serious stuff.
And that's the thing. It's like those people, they're going to be there for you, but they can't relate in the way that you would like them to. And
Right.
it's just a hard dynamic when you're the only person that who's going through a situation like this. It's like nobody understands you. And that with your story, I'm sure that you can relate to that feeling as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, they can sympathize, but they can't empathize because they
Until you
have
go
really
through it.
no idea what you are dealing with. And you can tell them until you're blue in the face, but unless they feel it and experience it, there's no way they can truly understand it. So that's hard, and it's It's lonely sometimes. Even though you're surrounded by people, that's a lonely feeling.
Yeah, it does. And
Absolutely.
it can weigh on you for sure.
Absolutely. Now, you said you went to your a pediatric doctor, and that was your first of two surgeries, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And you had, so tell us about your second surgery, which I'm hoping sounds a little bit better than your first one.
Well, it, it's the whole story is just twists and turns. So with the first surgery, that was to remove my entire colon, and during that time, I had an ileostomy bag, an ostomy bag, and for those who don't know, it's this your small intestine, because that's all I had at the time and still only have. It is protruding right next to your belly button. So looking down, you can see your intestine, and that's a crazy experience in itself. Like that's something you see in the movies again. And so I had that bag, and ironically, like internally, pain wise, I felt so much better after that first surgery. But mentally, I just went down this hole really bad because I had zero self worth, zero confidence. I was just festered up with so much anger and looking at myself in the mirror every single day and just hating what I saw.
Yeah.
And that it was only 2.5 months when I had that bag, because the second surgery was the takedown of that bag. But it really left this imprint in my subconscious that I'm not worthy. And I'm still shedding it off today. Like it's something that I would not like to admit that, but going through these events where we actually met in Dallas,
Mhm.
that was one of the realizations that I had in one of these visualizations that we did with one of the speakers. And it just brought me through this whirlwind of emotions that I don't necessarily feel worthy of love and acceptance because of my illness still. And that was a big realization for me. I thought I healed. I'm doing so much better than I was, but
Yeah.
those feelings are still lingering. And so I share that because it wasn't a long period of my life, but it's not really the time frame, it's the impact that it makes on you. And anyone can go through a situation that dramatically changes their mindset and leaves an imprint on their life. um, so I was actually excited to get that second surgery because of all of that, and I was looking forward to it, but I ended up having some complications. And the way my intestines settled in, the surgeon, he did a great job, but I just had a lot of empty space because your colon is like 3 to 5 feet long. It's a very big organ. So
3 to 5 feet.
yeah, they removed
That's
it.
all right. Sorry to interrupt you, Dan. That's crazy. Like 3 to 5 feet of you was taken out,
Yeah,
right?
like 5 pounds. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Sorry. And so your complications, were they during the surgery or is this post surgery?
This is post surgery. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I couldn't eat anything because of this twist in my small intestine. Everything would get clogged, and they would give me these intestinal blockages that I was constantly going to the ER for. And that's it is the worst pain that I've ever experienced and probably will ever. There's only two ways to unblock it, and you can go to the ER. And well, I guess the two ways are either surgery or you unblock it yourself and you just wait for time to pass. So that's the best way to do it through all the ER experiences that I've done. You wait in the ER, it takes you so long to get checked in. They give you a morphine, it just slows your digestive system down even more. You can only drink water, you can't eat any food. Like it's just this whole horrible experience for 24 hours while you're stuck there.
I just have
Um,
to let our listeners and viewers know. We'll put it in the show notes, but you guys need to go read Dan's first blog post where
yeah.
he does a great job of descriptively describing that experience. When I was reading that, I was like, "Oh my goodness. Like I don't know how you did that." The whole thing about the dry heaves and then having the morphine and then passing out from the pain and waking up and just doing it all over again. I mean, that
Yeah,
how
I
you
know what you're talking
endured
about.
that, that's oh man, I don't know. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, I think the
Can you
crazy part is I'm laughing about it now, but yeah, sorry.
well, you survived it. You're on the other end, you
Yeah, I'm
know? I
just
mean,
happy. Yeah, to get
what they
through it.
say is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And I mean, you must be like Superman because that must have been a ordeal.
It was.
Now, just for my clarification, what is the time frame between you said you started having issues that you really noticed, like in Easter, to this second surgery? Like, is this in the same year? Is this just a couple of months, or what's the time frame there from the beginning of when you first started to have some symptoms to that second surgery?
Yeah, so symptoms were Easter 2015. My first surgery was June 2016. Second surgery was
Wow.
August 2016.
Okay, so all this is happening in like a year and a half time,
Very fast, yeah.
and and you're fastly approaching your senior year in high school.
I am, yes.
Like this is like like the most important year of your life when you're in high school, like senior year. So tell us a little bit about more about that because now we're getting close to. So you had your second surgery and you're about to start your senior year. Is that right?
No, so I actually got the first surgery 4 days after I graduated high school.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where it's like you're thinking about your college plans, but then
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
your whole future. Like at that point, I couldn't see a future. Like there was no
Sure.
light at the end of the tunnel. So that put me in a weird dynamic, but in a sense, it was the best thing for me because I, even in high school before I got diagnosed, I wasn't really clear on what I wanted to do. And I felt so much pressure into figuring that out because fortunately, I actually had a college path laid out for me. You can go to college, anyone you want, you can pick what you want to do. Like, we're going to do this for you. But that put so much pressure for me to figure it out, and I could never do it. Um, Doing some one thing for the rest of my life. It's like the most terrifying, like making that
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so it gave me the time. That's what I want to reiterate. So I went to community college. I was like a 2.0 GPA student in high school. I was a 4.0 in college. So I was able to transfer into Michigan State University, my dream college that wiped away by the time I was in 10th grade of high school because I was like, oh, it's just not going to happen with the way my grades are right now.
Hmm.
So the fact that that happened was very crazy in itself. And it's almost because of the illness that put me down that path to really start taking my education serious. That whole year I was homebound in high school. I was learning, I had a couple classes that I had to take and I was teaching myself. So all of that helped me in college as well. And I also was in college during COVID. So everyone else, they're freaking out. Classes are online. They don't know how to learn and they're just struggling, mental health as well. But
Yeah.
I prepared for that in a sense. Like I had years of being on my own, teaching myself, doing these things. So COVID, that was nothing. I actually stacked up my classes. And so I graduated earlier because we went online.
Wow.
Um, so we can always flip the script and turn adversity into our advantage, but it really just takes some proactive intentions on doing that.
For sure. For sure. Man, Dan, you're 25 now, correct?
Yes, 25.
Yeah, I am amazed at the way that you have dealt with adversity in your life at such a young age and still being a young man, the things that you are accomplishing now. Um, your presence is that you are wise beyond your years. So this is it's fun talking to you and hearing about this. So
Likewise, man.
well, thank you. Speaking of that, it kind of dovetails into like your mindset and how you deal with things. And I know that you are, I don't know if practitioner is the right word, but at least I know that you're a fan of Stoicism. And so, for some of our listeners and viewers out there that may not know what Stoicism is, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's I came across this in 2018, and it's really the thing that got me out of a victim mentality, and I started taking ownership of my life. And that's why it's so important to me, and something that I continue to study and practice every single day by journaling and doing these exercises to just continue to sharpen that sword. But what Stoicism is, it's ancient Greek philosophy. I think it's been around for about 2,000 years right now. Uh, Marcus Aurelius, he's the big known figure, emperor of Rome at the time. And
Mhm.
really, what it boils down to is controlling what you can control and responding rather than reacting. And so there's always that, we always have that decision. And what Stoicism reminds us is that everything that happens is neutral until we give it a meaning. So all these events that happened to both of us, a lot of people would deem those to be very unfortunate events. But is it an
Yeah.
unfortunate event, or is it just an event? That's the thing. And so,
Yeah.
we can turn all of this pain into purpose, and then it becomes a good event. And so it's really comes down to our perspective and how we objectively view the world. And so once I started viewing the world without all of these emotions attached to certain things, that's where I just liberated myself from all of this negative thinking. And I started, like I said, taking ownership, start being proactive and taking steps forward, and really just like got control of my life. And so I started doing, instead of looking at everything that was wrong and complaining about it and all of that, I'm looking at the few things that I can do, like my diet, my exercise, my mental health, journaling, these little things that stack up, my routines, my morning and night routine, my relationships. Like there's so many things that we can, just these small tweaks, but they make such a big difference. And so step by step, I started chiseling away and continuing to do that today.
So would you say that stoicism is kind of a way of looking at life through a different lens? Would that be, I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of a watered down explanation, but would that be a fair assertion of that?
yeah. And really, it's just what I view it. If you want to just boil it down to the simplest concept, is what are the things in your life that are out of your control, and what are the things in life that are within your control? Take away that whole list that's outside of your control, so you only have what's in your control, and then
Mhm.
only focus on that. And when you do that, you're not going to be turning your wheels on things that, you know, don't get anything done, don't really have any relevance or importance. That can be like drama and things, or just things that are really out, like politics, easy example, like that's out of your control. But over here, you do the things you start. They say, like, if you want to boost up the economy or something, like start boosting up the economy in your home. Like it all starts with you. Um, so just like doing that and focusing on the things you can control. Really, if anyone wants to start applying stoicism, that's the first step to doing it, in my opinion.
Focusing on putting your energy on the things that you can control instead of focusing on things that you can't.
Exactly.
Simple, but not easy, right?
Yeah, that's true, but
Yeah,
also effective.
but very effective, right? So let's get back to talking about basically your healing. How was your healing journey? I mean, after your second surgery, I mean, still I can't imagine like again, guys, go check out his that very first post. There's pictures on there that show what he was talking about, like that small intestine sticking, poking outside of his body. And it's interesting to watch actually when you're looking at that post and how you posted the pictures, because you can actually kind of see a progression of your body and like how you were losing weight, and you can see that in those pictures. That's really interesting. It really took that was a lot of forethought for you to
Yeah.
have to take those pictures so you'd actually be able to look back and see your journey. But I guys highly recommend you go check out that blog post. It's incredible. Um, but let's talk about your healing journey. Like, when do you feel like you started to, I guess, turn the corner and go from not necessarily, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the victim mindset of the negativity to, okay, I'm going to do everything that I can in my power to heal myself and really focus on the positive things.
It wasn't until I started diving into Stoicism where I started taking the action that I needed to take to actually rebuild my body. So I always say it starts in here first. Like you have to change here first before you can change your physical body.
Yeah,
And
so
that's when
true.
I started taking the action. Like diet and exercise were the first two things. And talking about that blog post, when I was healthy before I got diagnosed, I was 150 pounds. I dropped all the way down to about like 118, 119.
Wow.
And yeah, just a toothpick. You can see the pictures. And that was the biggest battle for me. Just constantly over the years, I got stuck at like 125, finally got up to 130. But when you think about that, like that's really not putting much weight on. I was still very skinny at the time from being 150. Um, and so it wasn't until 2018 I started diving into Stoicism and changing the way I approach life, where I made commitments to myself. And that's something that I wasn't really doing. And made this dedication to go to the gym 4 to 5 times a week, especially when I don't feel like it. But I was so determined to build my body back up. And we talked about on your podcast, this was one of the hardest things for me. When we go through this illness or our entire life changes in whatever way, we want to go back to our old self. And so that's what I was trying to do for the longest time.
Yeah.
But then I realized it's like, oh, like I have to create a new normal for me.
Yeah.
And that's what I realized. And it took longer than I wanted to, but small steps forward. And I would say that my diet, it took so much trial and error to figure out what I can and can't eat, figuring out different macros, what I need to absorb nutrition wise, what I'm not absorbing because I don't have a colon. That's a whole nother conversation.
That's right.
Um, and so it just took me a few years to figure out like the science behind all of that. But once I started eating the right foods that started agreeing with me on a consistent basis, and then combining that with the weight training, I'm all muscle now. Like there's no fat on me. And so like that's how I've built up my weight is through muscle. So it's just taken a lot of discipline to get to that point and
Sure.
a lot of trial and error. I think that's the best way to learn. Obviously, if you can, ask someone some questions who've already done it and jump speed your process, that's great. But everybody is different at the end of the day. So what may work for me may not work for you, and vice versa. So
Right.
I'm really a big advocate for trial and error and attacking things with aggressive patience, something that I learned from Ben Newman.
Aggressive patience and courage. Listening to you tell the story about going to the gym with your colostomy bag, like that is courage, my man. Like walking in to the gym, like I'm gonna get my workout in anyway, and you don't know if you're gonna have a little gurgle or something's gonna happen, but that's just brave. That's courage. That is heart, and that is, in my estimation, is such a perfect example of positive persistence, that your why was so big that it was like, you know what, it doesn't matter what's in front of me. I'm going to push through this, and I'm going to go get my health on, get my fitness on, get my body back, right? Because I imagine, at least for me, again, I want to put words in your mouth, but we have a very similar yet different story. But a big part of it was getting our bodies back, right?
Yeah.
Like you wanted to have your body back.
And it's crazy because there's this experience in February 2018 was really the catalyst that changed my life. I say stoicism, but if this event didn't happen, I probably wouldn't have dove into stoicism the way that I did. So I was in a week time frame. All of this happened. I was diagnosed with mono, an E. coli infection. I got an intestinal blockage that I ended up finally going to the ER for, not for the other two things, but for the blockage. And then my girlfriend, who, same girl, we were on the camping trip together when I got diagnosed, she ended up, we stuck through it for a couple years through all of this. And at that point, it's like, oh, we're never breaking up after this. We've been through it all. She suddenly breaks up with me without any explanation. So I'm just alone in the ER room. I got my mom, but I'm just there broken and left to pick up the pieces at that point.
All in a week's time.
All in a week's time. And so that really just shifted, like gave me this big wake up call that like I got to figure things out. Like that was my lesson from that. And that's where I made those commitments to go to the gym, to start putting myself first, because I had all this extra time now, of course.
Right.
But I was upset about all of that happened. But the biggest thing for me, and that's why I bring this up, is because I was so upset that I lost another 10 pounds during that time with the mono and the E. coli. So I went from like 135 to 125 again. And I was just like heartbroken because of that. Like, I thought that I'm never going to get over this illness. Like, here I had these surgeries in 2016, and here in 2018, I'm falling apart again.
Yeah.
So, like, I spent all of 2017 building myself up the best I could. So, that was this big hit on me, but I didn't stay there. Like, I was determined, that lit my fire inside. And I was like, no, it's go time now. Like, I'm putting myself first. I'm doing the things I need to do. I'm just going to get out there and I'm going to do it. So wanted to share that story with you.
Yeah. So that sounds like that was a big turning point in your healing process. And not just physically, but mentally as well.
Yeah, big time. And honestly, the best thing that could have happened to me, and hopefully the best thing that could have happened to her as well.
Well, Dan, I could continue talking to you about your story because it is absolutely amazing, but I want to get into EMG because this is awesome. So right now, tell us about, so you've gone through school, let's say you've graduated college. What's the next step? What's the next step in the story of Dan right now?
So I actually came up with EMG while I was in college. Same with Nova Fusion. I rebranded from that blog, the first blog that we've mentioned now. That was my website at the time. I just had to share that story. But then I was like, okay, I need to rebrand, share not less about me, but bring more people in and create a community here. And I didn't like being the spotlight of the show. Like I wanted to be behind the scenes and really facilitate a lot of this. So that's where EMG and Nova Fusion came into play, but specifically EMG, which stands for experiences plus mindset equals growth. After I did that first blog, I'm like, well, I can't just stop here. Like, what's the next thing? Because that was my only intention, was to put the blog out there.
Yeah.
And looking at my story and everything that I've gone through, I don't really have to explain it now. Like, the experiences, the mindset led to the growth. But it wasn't just my story. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, because you look at yourself, you've gone through it as well, experiences, mindset, growth. But you look at any great person in history, we typically look at their successes. But when we peel back the layers, there's so many failures, if not more than the successes that they had to go through, that prepared them, that got them battle tested, that they had to walk through those fires for them to learn those lessons, shift their mindset, change their perspective. And that ultimately put them down this new path and led to the growth that we celebrate and see today. So peeling back my story, peeling back your story, peeling back all these successful stories, I'm like, hey, like, I want to create a timeless brand that's going to be 100 years from when I'm gone, that continues to live on. I talk about stoicism. I want to build something here as well. And so that's where EMG came into play, and just continued, doing more of the same with, talking about these stories of adversity, because I realized by sharing my story, like we connected by sharing our stories, and we have totally different stories, but the way that we overcame the feelings that we felt about ourselves, all these negative emotions, we both had to go through that in entirely different situations, but we can both share lessons and things that we've done to help each other out. And so that's what we're doing with the podcast. That's similar to what you're doing with your podcast, Positive Persistence. And
Yeah,
it's really just unfolded from there.
that is awesome. I know that one of the things that you talk about is, and I guess it's kind of goes back to Stoicism, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, you kind of touched on this already, and it's so important to share these stories because so many other people have gone through similar situations, or at least are having some of the similar feelings that have happened that we went through with our situations. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to, get over that hump and push through that adversity and get to the other side. But one of the things that I've heard you say, and I've read in some of your text, is that if you change the meaning of what happened, you change the influence and impact it has on you. And I
I
think
like that.
that's so key, because I tell people when they ask me, about what happened to me in my story, and one of the things I tell them is that if we are put here on the earth for a reason, I have to imagine. The only thing I can imagine is that the reason I do what I do now is because of what I went through. Like that was, and if it didn't happen to me, my life would be totally different than it is now. Like I would have never gotten into the fitness industry. And there are so many other things that came after that because of that. And I wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now, frankly. In doing something that I love to do, and I'm passionate about. So it is totally, how you frame it up. And something else that I read about you, and I'm happy to join you in this, is that you are a Bruce Lee fan.
Yeah.
Hello.
My guy.
Yeah, the master, Bruce Lee. Love it. Love that. And I know that I think I read somewhere that that's you've referenced him when you were describing Nova Fusion, I think, at one time, like Nova being your alter ego. Talk a little bit about that for us. And I know you got to run, so I don't want to go long on time, but I am interested to hear about your alter ego, Nova.
Yeah. So you're bringing up all these great questions. I love it. Um, so with Nova in particular, I was in an astronomy class my first semester at Michigan State. So I just posted the blog, trying to figure out where am I going next with this. And I'm really fascinated with astronomy, first off, and just a really cool class. We're learning about supernovas and all these asteroids and stuff. And when you look at a supernova, it's this star exploding, and
Mm-hmm.
all these raw pieces and raw materials are just scattered throughout the universe, but those are the raw building blocks to building new life and new stars. So when you think about that, I'm like, I wanted to create a new story for myself, because in my mind at that time, I'm still battling, this, a lot of this is still fresh. So I had
Yeah.
to separate from Dan at the time and create this new version of myself who wasn't sick, who felt empowered, who, mentally was a lot stronger than he was at the time. And so I'm just creating this archetype, that's the word,
Mm-hmm.
of who I wanted to become. And based off of that philosophy with the supernova, I felt like that's what I was creating with all these raw materials and all these experiences that I went through. So Nova is my alter ego of who I'm stepping into, the best version of myself every single day. And it gets to a point where you're in certain situations and you need to flip the switch. But since you've created that, it's like, who Nova is, what it stands for, the type of person you have to be and how you have to act. And you can flip that switch. Like you look at Sasha Fierce, Mamba Mentality, Black Mamba, Slim Shady. Like I looked at all these. Like I'm from Detroit, so like I'm growing. I
Right.
knew alter egos from a very young age. Um, And so that's where that came into play. But the fusion, that's what came from Bruce Lee. And so his particular style was really just a group of many styles.
Yep.
And I found that to be so interesting. And he was breaking barriers at the time and starting fights, not to be ignorant, although he looked very ignorant by the way he was just challenging these norms. But at the time, the only way to learn these other new styles was to challenge and fight someone else that has a different style, because they weren't open to sharing, their styles and techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would do that just so he could learn. He was the best fighter in the world, but it didn't matter if he won or lost. He was more concerned about learning and cultivating his own unique system. And so with the not Wing Chun fist, but the Kung Fu, that's what he did. He's just, he punches one way, he kicks another. You're going up against this guy. You think you know what he's doing, but you have no idea what he's doing. And that's why he was so effective. And, that's what I believe. It's like fusion, combining all of these things, gathering the raw materials, putting the best together so that you can become the best version of yourself. And my system is going to be different from your system and the person listening to this conversation right now. We're going to have pieces that overlap, and they're great. Like, we use these tools, but, at the end of the day, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and we have to adapt that with, what we have and what we can do with that. So that's where that comes into play, and something I'm actually really proud of.
That's awesome, man. Again, like, wise beyond your years. That is awesome.
Appreciate you.
For sure. Dan, I know that you have got a game coming up, so I will not hold you any longer, but I just want to thank you for joining us on the Positive Persistence podcast. But before you roll out of here, can you please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find out more about you?
Yeah, appreciate you, man. I am on Instagram a lot right now at Nova Fusion Co. LinkedIn, I'm growing that, just Dan Stowell. You'll see the guy with the red hair pop up. That's me, for those who aren't watching the video here.
Right.
And then my website is novafusion.co. So between the three of those, you'll be able to find me, see what I got going on. The podcast, we have a 21-day wellness and resilience challenge. So I'm happy to help anyone out there. Like, if you found value from this conversation, please reach out to me. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them and just be of service. So that's where you can find me.
Absolutely. That's awesome. All right. So we're going to wrap up today's episode. So I want to thank you guys for joining us on another episode of the Positive Persistence podcast. If you like what you heard today, please be sure to like and subscribe to the Positive Persistence podcast. You can also find more Positive Persistence on my website, ianbowen.net. On the website, you can actually read my blog that is full of useful information and inspiring stories. And also be sure to check out the Positive Persistence on our socials. Thank you once again for Dan. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for our listeners for tuning in for another episode of the Positive Persistence podcast. I am your host, Ian Bowen, reminding you to stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything. We'll see you next time.